For this day, which combines Shabbat and July the 4th, it seems to me we should have a special American Jewish ritual. I suspect that most of you participating in this service, here or at home, are proud to be Jewish, and I imagine that most of you are also proud to be Americans. Neither Jews nor Americans, nor even Jewish Americans, are perfect. And America is going through a wrenching period of re-examining our flaws in how we have treated people of color, and we are living through decades of political polarization which make it difficult to get much done in government. I grew up during the Vietnam War, which was and is widely regarded as an unnecessary and unproductive conflict. And I grew up during the peak years of the civil rights movement. I'm painfully aware that the United States is not perfect or even united, for that matter. And yet I am still proud to be an American, in part because I am a Jew. I know how good America has been for Jews. Far better than Europe was. We have the freedom to live as Jews and build Jewish institutions, and notwithstanding the resurgence of anti-Semitism in recent years, the broad range of Americans are friendly to Jews and to the State of Israel. And I also believe that Americans on the whole honestly strive for greatness. We aspire to greatness even where we have not yet achieved it. So I think we should have a ritual for this day which combines Shabbat and July 4th. And the ritual I propose is one that many of you know from Sukkot. On each night of Sukkot, it is nice to invite guests to sit with us, to enjoy a meal and a visit in the sukkah. But our Jewish mystics would invite spiritual guests, ushpizin, to visit the sukkah. Traditionally, it was the practice to invite Abraham on the first night, Isaac on the second night, and so on. Many people today do a modern variation, inviting other Jewish leaders and teachers, historical figures. And so for today, I'll tell you who I would invite. If we could have 7 people who made a contribution to Judaism and to America. The first person I would include would be Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, who as an adult never identified as Jewish, but whose mother was almost certainly Jewish, and her first husband was definitely Jewish. And yes, Alexander Hamilton's father, James Hamilton, was a Scotsman and not Jewish. But Hamilton even attended a Jewish school in the 1760s as a youngster on the British island of Nevis in the West Indies. If you heard Rabbi Morgan speak about it last night, you've already heard much of what is known about this. Most of the Jews there were refugees from the Inquisition or descended from such refugees. I don't know how much about Judaism Hamilton knew, but he was a strong opponent of slavery and a firm believer in human rights. And he did write about his admiration for Jews. Here is one passage from his writings. You can find it on the internet. From their earliest history to the present time, Jewish survival for millennia against all odds has been and is entirely out of the ordinary course of human affairs. Is it not then a fair conclusion that the cause also is an extraordinary one? In other words, that it is the effect of some great providential plan. The man who will draw this conclusion will look for the solution in the Bible. He who will not draw it ought to give us another fair solution. That certainly sounds like an affinity for Judaism. I'd love it if I could ask Hamilton about it. The second person I would include is also from the Revolutionary era, Chaim Solomon. He was a Polish Jew who left his home as a youngster, traveled around Europe, and came to New York not long before the American Revolution. He had been in the liquor business in Europe, did it in New York. He knew many languages, and he had a gift for finance. Working in New York, he sold liquor to German troops who were hired by the British, but he also spied for the Americans and worked to free prisoners escaping from the British. The British sentenced him to death for espionage, but he escaped and made his way to Philadelphia. Within a few years, he built a business as a financial broker. But in this time, there was no way to collect taxes during the War of Independence, and Chaim Solomon raised the money needed to supply the troops and to run the government, leading up to the campaign ending at Yorktown in 1781. In those difficult years, despite his skills and his service to the new country, he was never able to earn money for himself and his family, and he died at the age of 45. Without money for a headstone, he was buried in a pauper's grave, and their fourth child was born a few months later. His legacy includes generous contributions to the Jewish community of Philadelphia, along with his patriotism during the war. President Madison later acknowledged that Solomon's generosity and commitment played a key role in the founding of our country. The third person I would invite would be Rebecca Gratz. Rebecca Gratz lived in Philadelphia in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Her father was descended from a long line of rabbis. Her parents were observant Jews. 5 of her brothers were veterans of the Revolution. She would have much to tell us from their stories alone. But she was especially known for her philanthropy. Rebecca Gratz founded the first Jewish philanthropic agency, the original Jewish Federation. She was also involved in founding the Philadelphia Orphan Asylum, and perhaps her greatest achievement was in creating the first Jewish Sunday school in the United States. She became its superintendent and president, directing it for over 25 years. After her death, one of her brothers founded a Jewish teachers' school in Philadelphia, and Gratz College still exists today. She never married. It's known that she turned down at least one non-Jewish suitor because she would not marry out of the faith. With her history and her dedication, I'm sure we could learn from a visit with her. The fourth person I would include is Emma Lazarus. She was, at first, far removed from the concerns and problems of her own people. She was a poet, an internationalist, until one day when she visited Jewish immigrants waiting to be admitted into New York Harbor. From the moment she saw her own people who were fleeing from tyranny, Emma Lazarus began to write poems of power and beauty as she had never written before. In 1833, she wrote the sonnet, The New Colossus, and then it was eventually inscribed on a tablet and placed in the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. I won't recite all of it. Many of you already heard it from Rabbi Morgan last night, but the conclusion is worth repeating. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. We Jews know history. We know what it is to be turned away. And Lazarus reminds us to welcome all, to bring people together, and to make it known that there is room for everyone in this land of opportunity. She died likely from cancer at the age of 38. The fifth person I would invite is Henrietta Zold. Born in Baltimore in 1860, the daughter of a rabbi, you probably know of her because she founded Hadassah and Youth Aliyah, which rescued so many Jewish children from Europe. You should also know that she was a gifted Jewish scholar. She was the first editor for the Jewish Publication Society. She also edited what is known as the Jastrow Dictionary. Now, I doubt most of you own a copy of Jastrow. I can guarantee you that just about every rabbi has one. For that matter, any serious student of rabbinic literature. Professor Jastrow prepared the entries, but she was the one who gave it order and made it useful. She collaborated in the creation of the first Jewish encyclopedia. She was admitted to take classes at the Jewish Theological Seminary on condition that she not seek ordination. And she won praise from faculty and students alike. She was also a key assistant to Rabbi Louis Ginsburg, one of the greatest of the many scholars at the seminary, particularly in creating one of the great 20th century works of scholarship, the multi-volume Legends of the Jews. But it was on a trip to Palestine in 1909, at the age of 49, that she decided to throw herself completely into the Zionist cause. She began to recruit American Jewish women to help provide health care in Palestine through hospitals, medical school, soup kitchens, and all of these for Jews and Arabs alike. She spent much time in Palestine in the years after the First World War, finally making Aliyah for good in 1933 at the age of 73, so as to work full-time for Youth Aliyah. And today, when half the Jews in the world live in Israel, we American Jews should take pride in her legacy and all she accomplished for Jews throughout the world. In this time of a pandemic, it would be especially fitting to include the great doctor and scientist Jonas Salk. He went to med school at New York University, one of the few which did not impose quotas on Jewish enrollment. He later worked on an Army project creating a vaccine for a type of influenza. Now, less than 70 years ago, Americans were nearly as fearful of polio as we are of the coronavirus. Dr. Salk was in charge of the team who developed the vaccine, putting an end to polio. That vaccine was made available around the world in 1955. Fortunately, it was also available in the backwater of central Oklahoma, where I remember receiving it at an early age. You never know, but it's just possible that I owe my life and health to Jonas Salk. We all know that vaccinations are controversial in certain circles. Dr. Salk crusaded for mandatory vaccination as part of his commitment to public health. He continued his research and spent his last years working to develop a vaccine against HIV. And for my seventh guest, the only one of these seven who is still alive, a politician, Senator Joe Lieberman, for many reasons. First of all, because he was a Jew first and a politician second. He was respected on all sides for being faithful to his religious principles. Second, because he was almost elected vice president, not once, but twice. Of course, had the Supreme Court ruled differently, he would have been elected in 2000. The second time, in 2008, Senator John McCain wanted to pick him as his running mate. But he consulted other GOP leaders who said, "You can't pick a Democrat as your running mate." Now, Lieberman later said that he turned it down, but many sources report the facts otherwise. McCain, in the worst mistake he ever made, picked Sarah Palin instead. If he had chosen Lieberman, he probably would have been seen as courageous and wise and would have won. And third, because whether you agreed with him or not, Lieberman did what he believed to be right, regardless of how his party or anyone else would react. He censured President Clinton's misconduct, and he endorsed McCain for president. We all claim that we want a politician to put principle over party, but we don't always appreciate it when they do. Hopefully, in another 6 years, the next time Shabbat and July 4th coincide, Senator Lieberman will still be around, and hopefully, he'll be in shul. That's my list. Perhaps some of you will consider who would be on your list over your lunch today. As we celebrate Shabbat and Independence Day, let us thank God for being in a land where we can be who we are, and for all who brought together the two worlds, the world of Judaism and the world of America. As the psalmist said, Zeh hayom asa Hashem nagila v'nismechavo. This is the day God has made. Let us rejoice and celebrate on it.